Hello, folks. Back with a follow-up on open education resources. So Allison McDowell, and I'm here with my good friend Lynn Davenport in Dallas. And so we're in the middle of sort of a series. It maybe end up being 4 parts, Lynn. I'm sorry to tell you. I was pacing through the slides. So we had an initial introduction in part 1. And the impetus behind this is the introduction of some legislation around open education resources in the Texas state legislature. So can we just like a brief recap, Lynn, for people who might have missed the first episode?
Yes. So we have a couple of bills in the House and the Senate for open education resources, and there was some discrepancy on what the legislators thought they were putting forth with this bill. They were thinking, it's going to make it easier for the teachers to do these lessons, which really is code for scripted, turnkey, lessons.
Data collection with fidelity.
With fidelity, right. Yeah. So we've been trying to educate them that what you're actually doing with open education resources is not just shifting the money from books to Chromebooks and technology, but there are all these layers behind it, which you and I mean, especially you, have helped us or helped me see, and hopefully will help others see that this is not just a national thing, because it does go all the way up to the Department of Education, but it's a global thing.
It is global. Yeah. And this idea of open education resources playlists is part of the lifelong learning program. We talked about that a little bit last time. And, the womb to tomb, cradle to gray. And so, if they can start training people up, and this is a little bit what we're going to talk about today, in virtual reality or extended reality headsets, there's massive amounts of data collection that you can get on the people. And a lot of they're going to pay for it with social impact finance, which uses, your future economic productivity as some sort of cost offset, and your mental health and stability in the process. And people, like, literally, one of the guys, when you were testifying the last time, Lynn, he was like, well, where does it say technology? I thought they were just going to print out worksheets, right? Like, whoa, like.
It was so condescending. It was like, where in this bill does this say technology? Where do you see devices or iPads?
Exactly. So in this section, I'm going to go a little bit into looking at sort of how a lot of the reskilling, like the workforce reskilling, that's going to be framed as the reskilling is going to be linked to outcomes-based financing. And so a lot of the stuff that's happening in Dallas with the Dallas County Promise and the associate's degree and the takeover of the community colleges is going to start blending, I think, with career and technical education. And that's something that the Federal Reserve is really interested in, and these people who are the big money backers, like the JP Morgans of the world. So they need the digital lockers and the digital identity to groom their human capital into not just the first job, but one of many, because you'll continually be chasing new badges and new skills as the AI proceeds.
Yeah, and I think you've got these willing legislators who take the bait, and they're mostly on the right, but that's not to say that it's not both parties. But at least in Texas, you're seeing, because the right is in power, that you have these legislators who are putting forth these reskilling and upskilling agendas, and people are not. They don't see it. They don't understand. Even you've got Ivanka Trump at the World Economic Forum talking about reskilling and upskilling.
Yeah.
And people can't seem to connect the dots to that. So I'm grateful that you've been able to help us piece it together and understand that this is not what people think it is. It's actually a planned economy, but with all that impact finance behind it.
Yeah.
So they can basically direct it to whatever their desired outcomes are.
Yeah. And I think the challenge is that often this is framed in conservative states as less government, more choice, right? But they're not really saying where these open education resources came from, whose idea were they, who else is using them. Yeah. Because what's coming is this idea of platform labor, just-in-time TaskRabbit platform labor, not just coding work or remote teaching or telemedicine, but things like remote robotics through these haptics. And so if you put a bunch of young people in virtual reality headsets, you're literally training them through these virtual apprenticeships that are coming down the line to be the gig workers in the global economy. And, there's no protection for all the people who are concerned about preserving economic viability in the United States. And again, I'm not trying to pit us against other countries. Like, I think we should figure out how to have a world that, like, all young people can have a chance, to use their skills and support families, right? But the way it's going to happen is that our cost of living in the global north is so much higher that when you open up for remote work to the entire world for the lowest price, people in Dallas are never going to be able to get the wages to stay living in Dallas unless they're stuck on a universal basic income,
That's right. That's right. And I know that people are recognizing what universal basic income is, but I don't think they're seeing that our local chambers of commerce and our legislators and our education institutions, like, they're all helping set this up.
Yeah.
But people don't see the kind of like the bigger picture of it.
I mean, it's hard to imagine because these are the people who are the experts, right? Like, even the blockchain task force, because this is all going to run on your digital identity. This is all about the digital credentials. It was set up by Lumina and, Jobs for the Future and the Gates Foundation for years and years and years and years, like probably easily since the 90s, cloud-based computing. This has been like coming one step at a time. And no one's publicly putting the pieces together, but
no. I've not seen anybody say and show and demonstrate with evidence what they're doing quite like what you've done.
So, and we're doing it together because you've always got your eye on the ball because you're really there. Yes. Like, you're going to Austin, you're seeing people, you're holding them accountable, like, 15 feet from where they're sitting, and you're telling them. And I love the most recent testimony that you gave, and just like, yeah, we need to do this, right? Like, you put them on the spot, and it's recorded. Can we do that? Can we do that?
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Let's get an audit. So. Okie doke. So we're going to try to get through 3 or 4 sections tonight, mostly sort of looking at the apprenticeship programs and the reskilling and just like where in the world did open education resources come from? Because it didn't just show up yesterday. It's been coming for a long time. And so for me, one of the things that really made a big impression, and I'm going to get to this image in a minute, but I was looking at a slide deck from JCA Solutions, which is based in Orlando. And it's essentially a defense contractor. So we have to understand, again, that extended reality, this idea of augmented or virtual reality, comes out of the military simulation program. So for a long time, and there's a logic to it, right? If you're going to have people in harm's way, you want to do all sorts of simulations, and you've got a situation and you want to try it over and over, all the different, permutations, so that people, when they enter that situation, it's just they know exactly what to do. So this has been developed largely in Orlando, Florida. The military simulation technology through the Advanced Distributed Learning Program. And JCA Solutions is a defense contractor from Florida. And so it was this image of a young kid in a VR headset in an Amazon warehouse looking type of thing. And they were training, and it looked like, a young kid, like maybe 12, like a tween, definitely not even a high school age kid, training them for this workforce readiness. And I don't know if you have thoughts about this, Lynn, but I remember when we were first digging into the education stuff, say 2015 or 16, and, with Emily, and looking at really the workforce tracking in elementary school, like in the youngest children, this idea that from the youngest age, they were going to be screened and introduced into the idea of career readiness from absurdly young ages.
Yeah, I started seeing it, and I had, working with unemployed people all those years, I was glad to see that they had kind of raised the ceiling for our junior high kids, at least showing them all the different types of careers. But it took it too far, where it was supplanting their most basic academic foundation, like, language arts and reading and writing papers and book reports and studying in that way. All of that was kind of going by the wayside so that they could bring in this more workforce and career tech and that kind of thing. And so then I realized there's something else going on here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and the idea is like a lot of regions, they have regional economies that are being planned out. So it's not quite the Hunger Games. They're not just like one economic interest in it per region, but there's like 8. And so it's interesting because I remember there was a woman who was doing advocacy in Kentucky, and her district was really on the leading edge. It was just outside of Cincinnati in northern Kentucky, and Cincinnati is where KnowledgeWorks and Strive Together are based. And they were seeing, blended learning, out of school time, work-based maker spaces, and literally the high school kids were given like 8 career options, really, and it was at this point you're thinking like, again, you on the one hand, you've got the free markets, conservatives, and people touting choice, but here they're saying, oh, well, here's your 8 choices. And I got to thinking, at the time, well, what happens if you want to move somewhere and that region doesn't have your job? Like, you just can't stay, you just have to stay where you're born because all the regional economies are that. And, at the time when I was looking at our regional economy for Southeast Pennsylvania, like the greater Philadelphia region, they had it all planned out. And even the high growth jobs that they anticipated, of the top 15 jobs, there was maybe 1 manager and 1 accountant, someone that would be making, one would make 70,000, one might make 50. The rest were like barely $15 an hour jobs. And those were our high growth jobs for the southeastern Pennsylvania region. And I remember like we had a city council doing poverty management, like this whole poverty committee. And I'm like, they were talking about housing, and I'm like, well, how can you can't even raise a family on those kinds of wages. So if this is the best you can do, like, we've got a problem. What if we're doing all of this job readiness for the kids and using these technologies, these open education resources to slot them into them, they're not giving people good choices.
No, and knowing what I know about the education agency in Texas, and I know it's not just Texas doing this, but seeing all of the AI and the predictive analytics and how they're using all of this gathered student data and where they're harvesting all of this, then that they have plans to feed all of this information into to be able to predict who will do what, and this future that they're imposing on us, using our students to feed this market.
Yeah. And so this is like the first slide that I have, and it's a YouTube video from a couple years ago, and the person is from Northern Macedonia. Okay. And the channel is Open Education Global, right? So these open education resources it's a global program. And the title of this slide, it has a young woman in a VR headset. And, I used to think it was so sad to see all the kindergartners with their earphones on, but now literally they don't, like, they have the thing on their eyes and their faces, and so they're totally disconnected from the world. And it's a survey of AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality technologies for OER. And it's a survey of this. So it's very clear. When the gentleman who introduced the bill thought it might be about printing out worksheets, like, he is on the entire other end of the continuum, because really what's happening is that open education resources, the pressure will be for those to become virtualized in extended reality. So while you may be dealing with some online content now, watching videos, soon it will be immersion. The goal is to have the young people immersed in that, and then all of that data is being harvested about how their eyes move, what their galvanic skin responses are like, to get the data to groom them and profile them as a future worker.
Well, and I think, one of the moms, Meg, had mentioned, when it's all of this is on technology, then it's dynamic and it can be changed at any time. So you think that you're able to review the content as a parent, because they acted like we would be able to do that. But not in this kind of world that you're displaying here that is coming and that they're setting up for. you won't be able to even see what your kids are doing or working on.
No.
Because it will be ever changing.
Well, and they will call this personalized, right? And so there will probably be some sort of algorithmic backend with artificial intelligence that will supposedly provide the scaffolding that a human teacher would, right? But with more, granularity or something like that. So every kid is being literally programmed through these devices. To what end, right? Because it's like they've determined, like to do the personalized learning, it's not to be an open-ended thinker, it's towards some predetermined destination. Like, what badges you're going to get. You need to be on this pathway for this job, this career track. And so they track you across the track, but this idea of getting midway down and realizing, well, this isn't working for me, I'd rather do this, that's not really going to be possible, because this precision is going to be so attuned to you. It's going to constantly reinforce a certain path to the point that you might not even realize you don't like what you're doing. Like, they might be so good at it, you'll just go along.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that it's difficult to explain that to people. And so it's nice to be able to see all of this so you can, it's a visual as well as an explanation.
Yeah. And so this is an image from this JCA Solutions report. And on it, it has the young man in the, operating some sort of small light equipment, like warehouse equipment, in the virtual reality goggles and in this yellow vest. And, definitely a tween there. And then what was really interesting to me, and I found this maybe 4 years ago, this slide deck, was that it had an infographic in it called Our New Taxonomy, and it was talking about what data they could receive out of the virtual reality experience on the person who was in the technology. And so this is through your eye movements and then haptics if you have things on your hands, and then some other things. So I'm just going to read out some of these. It's a circular infographic. It says, like in the middle, waste bin. I'm not sure why it says waste bin. Voice recognition, test mode, incomplete tasks, power glove, documentation. Okay, so the measurable things are visual location, the time taken, the motion, biometrics, eye focus, task completion, and scores. It can also measure the environment, the heart rate, the view of the camera, the operation of the controllers and the audio, the laptop, the headset, the motion sensors, and the location. And then the participants in the activity are the people testing it, the students, the administrator, and the instructor. So there's all sorts of data. And, and again, when I saw this 4 years ago, I think most people weren't aware that it wasn't just you looking out, but it was the device looking in at you.
Yeah. And
developing that. And that is all metadata. And so I have a paper here that I shared from IEEE, and I think it might be 2020, called Using Metadata in Open Education Resource Repositories. So it's all about, like, on the one hand, and we talked about this a little bit last time, tagging all of the objects with tags so that you can find the resources you want to find. But at the same time, you as a digital identity person with a digital locker, like the green light credentials, all of the things that you interact with and your competencies that you've either attained or that you have not obtained, attempted but not obtained, all of that metadata is going to accrue to you and your digital twin.
Well, and then they have to get their foothold at some point. So that's kind of why I'm sounding the alarms with all of this in Texas, is because that's how we get to all of these things that are listed in that circle. And the things that they will be measuring, they may not be there right now, but they have to start somewhere. And so they start with these bills, and it informs policy and turns into a law. And then the next step is all of these other things that you're seeing, that you're showing right there. Well, so it's incremental.
Like, what does being a teacher look like in this environment? Here, children, I'll put on your headset so you can be independently programmed on a career pathway when you're in 6th grade.
Yeah.
I mean, in these, I have to say, even though I'm kind of, trying to stay outside of the political frame, but like these very same people would be framing this as communist, right? Like if you took a sixth grader and said, this is your job, this is your work path, you're just going to be on it. And don't worry, the AI is going to program you to be your best optimal self, to be, whatever, do this certain kind of work, be a biotech engineer.
Well,
they would have a problem with it.
Because we've had so many issues with sensational stories of teachers who have gone rogue, which is really not the norm, but the media makes it appear that way. So, and then you have all of the culture wars going on. So I think there are people who actually think, oh, well, having this digital is this digital option and all of this open education resources, and they'll be scripted and easier for the teachers, then we can do away with all of this the cultural and the political stuff coming in, but they don't understand that it doesn't change anything, really. Anything that you see that is digital, it's made by people. It's not. Well, and it's not like it eliminates any of that.
It's military, and so I think something that people aren't considering maybe in terms of the military technologies, like you might think of the military weapons being, tanks or nuclear missiles or guns or whatever, but a huge part of it is behavioral propaganda, both managing your own soldiers and the people in the military, and then using that against civilian populations and other, like, this is a fine-tuned science, finely tuned for a very, very long time, that really a lot of these technologies are wedded very closely with Hollywood and CGI development and the development of synthetic people out of the Institute for Creative Technologies at USC. And I remember finding out that there was a curriculum, I think it was a Carnegie math curriculum, that was linked, again, personalized learning math curriculum, that was funded by the Army Research Lab. And this USC Institute for Creative Technologies that's developing a lot of this, they're funded like kind of equal parts by like Disney and the military. So people,
well, and you've got I always talk about this education agency head, this Mike Morath guy, who's really pushing for this stuff. But what's interesting is back when he was in Dallas ISD on the school board, this superintendent came in. He was from the Department of Defense. His sister was fired when she worked for the Department of Defense. He started all these charter schools once he left Dallas ISD. So he kind of blew things up. And they had to bring in all of the, their data-driven models and the merit pay and all of that. And then he goes to Colorado, starts these charter schools. He's now coming back into Texas. But the Department of Defense background is interesting to me because I think it's significant based on what you've studied on the military's involvement in education and technology and gamification and all of that.
Yeah. And the thing that's important to understand about the military is there's a chain of command, right? And so the social environment of that's how it works. If you have somebody giving orders and all the other people going, well, I don't think that, I think this, or whatever, and debating it, like, that doesn't work in the military, really. And so the question is, if we apply that broad scale to K-12 education, higher education, lifelong learning, what kind of society does that get you if what you're training kids for is something, these technologies that are based in following the chain of command, do as you're told, don't ask questions, right? Because we're clearly going into a very unsettled, disrupted technological era that you would, people pay lip service to wanting critical thinkers. So,
right.
Whenever you think about the military, it's a fundamentally different training. The goal is fundamentally different between training people to look at a situation from all different angles, develop their own understanding of it, being able to articulate that to others and develop a consensus within a civil society, and someone who's literally meant to, with fidelity, comply with orders and carry that out. Those are two different things.
That is, so it's twofold, because you've got the teachers who have to comply and fall in line and have the scripted OER lessons. And then you've got the students who have to, same deal. They're given their tasks and their outcomes-based models. It's the same for both. It's just different. We're talking children versus adults, but it's like military precision in the way that it's all being laid out for them.
Yeah. I mean, and I remember back, when they were talking about, I think it was the Gulen charter schools, where they would have teachers that would have ear mics and someone would coach them through their ear and tell them what to say. You know what I mean? So like that
like
literally.
My first job as a recruiter, it was like that. My boss would stand over and with the earpiece, and I'd have to, she'd tell me what to say. That was terrible.
So this is a slide just talking about the data, just to emphasize that again. It's an image of somebody, I don't know what they're doing. They're raising their hands like they're tapping on something, but there's nothing, like literally, 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, if you saw someone doing that, you'd be like, oh, that person has issues, right? Like waving their hands around, like in nothing. But
right.
It's called the unseen value of VR data. And so this is a quote from an article. It says, Justin Perry is a chief operating officer at Immerse, a company that creates dynamic, measurable, and scalable immersive VR training for businesses. Okay. And that's something, remember we talked about that last time, Lynn, with Amplify, when they were talking about like high impact learning technologies, that they wanted things that were measurable because they would feed into the social impact bonds.
Yeah, high quality instructional materials and all. And there's this one legislator who always says, "Well, you can't fix what you don't measure." That's always what they say. And so it's all about measuring every step of the way. Yeah. And yes, Amplify is the vendor. It's considered a vendor bill, or these are vendor bills because a particular vendor benefits from the passage of the bill. Yeah. And so if this is the way they're treating employees, is to slap on a VR headset and get immersive measurable data. Later on in the article, it says the VR platform's ability to capture detailed trainee data securely will pave the way for more effective, more data-driven learning and development programs. So like, this is what they're imagining for corporate America, right? Everybody just put on your VR headset and zone out into the zone that you can be data mined. And so it's not, we should not be surprised seeing the trajectory here of going from like OER in headsets, stemming from like little kids in headsets and data being collected, to just going straight through to the corporate. Like they're hoping that they'll just push this forward and we will accept this as normal. Yeah, that's right.
So this is from the JCA Solutions slide deck. Now, this particular slide deck, and I can, link to it when we share this, it was about, this is foundational to competency-based education. So competency-based education also goes by the name sometimes proficiency-based education or mastery-based education. And a lot of times it's wrapped up in like student choice and voice and agency, and we don't need seat time, and it's not about, it's unbundled, and, but essentially it's non-linear, that each student is just collecting some skills as they go along, but not within the context of a class with a teacher. And I don't think any of us realized when we were pushing back against competency-based education, and I think Maine was one of the states that was really, they were in the lead on that, and pushed it back for a time, but then I'm sure it's going to sort of bubble back up because this is the future that they're building. But we didn't understand that the competency-based education was linked to data mining in digital spaces, and that those digital spaces would include VR. Like at the time, it was just not front and center. Like you wouldn't automatically think, oh, they're getting rid of our normal grading scale and substituting it with these competencies. Oh, that must mean that my kid is going to have to put their brain in a robot and compete for a global gig economy. Like we just didn't think of that.
No, they'll give some other reason why they have to do that. So it's the incremental changes, but it all leads to this that you're showing.
Yeah. So in this, they were just giving a speculative task. So you would put on a VR headset and you would have to complete a task to the specification, right? And then if you did, you got the competency, you would get the badge. And so in this case, it's kind of ridiculous, but it was like the simulation was on how to pet a strange dog, like how to safely pet a dog you don't know. right? And there were various steps. Like you had to look at all the dogs and choose a dog and put your hand the right way and whatever. They like, I don't know if they virtually simulated like kids being mauled by dogs or whatever, but that was the competency, was petting a dog properly. And so in this, it's all literally a program. They're looking at how you interact in the headset and all of these different steps. So this is on the slide. It says, what data do we need? Number one, whether or not the student has successfully completed the task in the correct order. Well, Lynn, think about what that is for like creative problem solving. Mm-hmm. Someone's already decided this is the way you do it. It's like this stupid math when they redid the math and you couldn't use it the old way. No, there's only one way to do it, and that's it. So that's stifling. How nervous the student was. So they have the capacity to assess your emotional state.
Right.
Which dogs the student asks to pet. Which dogs the student actually pets. Which steps are missed the most often. Where the student is looking.
So the eye.
Yeah.
Tracking.
So a lot of the eye tracking. And yeah, the physiological state of the, and imagine that every time you put a VR headset on, it goes on your permanent record. Like you got to believe that the metadata is going to green light somehow.
Right.
And they're all about the mental health, right? And like, what does it mean if they know that you're nervous around dogs on your permanent record? You know, like, I mean, that's a lot of information that we should be asking questions about. So this is the slide deck. It's called A Taxonomy for Data Capture in Virtual Reality and Augmented Reality by Dottie Lindsay, JCA Solutions. And this was 2018 at the iFest, National Training and Simulation Association Conference. In this slide deck, they talked about the cost savings. Now, wouldn't it be amazing if the teachers' unions were actually talking about this? Like they literally, I mean, I think it was devastating after years of trying to educate the teachers in Philadelphia about, and these are the progressive teachers, about the concerns around ed tech. I literally had teachers cheering on the introduction of Google Cardboard, the little augmented reality Google glasses in the classroom.
Right.
Oh, look, we can go on field trips. And they just don't even there was no way to communicate to them what's really happening. So here, this was a section from the slide deck in 2018. According to Brandon Hall's group's research, and then it has a little chart, the cost savings on e-learning courses versus a simulation. So it says developing an e-learning course takes an average of 106 hours, and that costs about $184 an hour. To produce a simulation, it takes an average of 96 hours. And then it says you could save more than $2,000 a program to do the simulation over the e-learning course. So they've already shunted the human teacher out entirely. And then they say, oh, but if we do it in a virtual reality, one, they're going to get a cost savings, and two, they're going to get more data.
Well, and that's what I try and explain to the teachers is, you know, early adopters get rewarded, but they're ushering in their replacement essentially. And we are getting some, we're seeing a little bit of progress with the teachers unions in Texas. And they actually had me speak against data mining and data harvesting in the schools and the replacement of teachers with technology at a rally about a month ago. So I'm seeing some, a small awakening because they were so quick to accept this new kind of reset that was coming in with the pandemic and the lockdown of the schools. And you've got their leader, Randy Weidengarten of the national AFT, partnering with these organizations like Education Reimagined. So yes, it's frustrating because it's very difficult to get them to understand that when they adopt all of these transformational things, that's just getting us further away from them actually having a job.
Yeah. I mean, and I think like this slide deck, if any teacher, It's not that hard to understand. Like, it's like 20 slides, this taxonomy for data capture, and knowing that it's a defense contractor and that there are children involved and the tasks are petting a dog, right? You can read between the lines without too much difficulty where this is going. It's just there's a profound disincentive, because I think a lot of times they feel kind of powerless about it, so they'd rather not know.
And explain what XAPI is.
Yeah, so the XAPI, initially the online learning came, it was through laptops. And so, or Chromebooks, and that sort of format. And so when you engaged in an online content, whether that was watching a video or taking an online quiz or doing something online, not necessarily like typing a paper, but some sort of online content with metadata, it would capture that information through something like Dreambox, right? Through one of these online programs. It would capture information through something called SCORM, Shareable Content Object Reference Module. And it would have data about how you interacted with that module. Now, but that only worked for a laptop format. It didn't work for tablets, and it didn't work for phones or wearables or extended reality. And so the next iteration, and it was later developed by a company called Problem Solutions up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and I think they actually had ties in Tennessee as well. They developed something called Tin Can XAPI, or Tin Can XAPI. And essentially that allowed them to expand into all these other technologies. Like, I didn't realize how quickly it would happen, like how quickly wearables and virtual reality would come on the scene. But this is what's coming with the OER. And so that data was able to be captured and then accrued to you as a digital agent in the game, a digital, through your digital locker, learning locker. And so I have a slide here, and it's all code, and it's an example of a statement. And so all of XAPI did, it would frame learning as a verb noun object, like I did this. And that this very simple coded unit would go into your competency locker. So on this slide, I have an example XAPI statement, and it's code, and it's too small for me to really read. But at the end, it says this is the statement that would be verified if they completed the task. A student gained access to a dog NPC, I guess that's non-playable character, and the student's resulting heart rate was measured.
Yeah.
So it's not just saying, did you achieve your competency, but all of the other data that goes, where did your eyes look? How fast was your heart rate? How quickly did you do it? It's this incredibly intense, quantified self micromanaging, and this idea that they really want to get children from, again, birth to death, as much data as possible so that they could create a predictive profile.
Mm-hmm. The whole child. And they, when you look at what the words matter, the words mean more than what is on the surface, I think. But the whole child.
And you can see how, for the most part, like once you get a handle on the Hegelian dialectic, this idea that they create the problem to give you the solution, right? So that was my first learning thing with the standardized testing, right? Oh, we won. Oh, no, we didn't win, right? Oh, they just changed the rules. Oh, we actually helped them move it to the next phase and we didn't understand. And it's a hard lesson. Like I remember when I realized what had happened when ESSA passed, and the ed tech and the outcomes-based the pay for success being embedded. And I'm like, we didn't win. And everyone's like, we won. Look, we got rid of Common Core. Look, we got rid of the end of year test. And I'm like, no, like what's coming is XAPI all the time. Like and this idea that, the kids won't be stressed when they're taking their year-end test because they'll be tested all the time, and actually they'll be stealth assessments and you'll never even know if they're watching or not watching. So it's literally the panopticon.
Yeah, they're bringing it right in.
So okay, so this is we had talked a little about Newton, the Newton Data Palooza. In it, I think his name is Jose Ferreira or whatever. And this is 2012. So this is, 10 years ago, was sort of, we kind of quit, but he's like, we'll collect all the data through ed tech, the most data mineable thing ever, until we get nanobots in our bodies, and then maybe health will give ed tech a run for its money. But for right now, and we can predict is once we get the data set, and I think he even said something on about food. Like we can tell you what you should be eating, but because we know you do better if you have waffles for breakfast on Wednesday. But this is sort of a map of all of these data points, talking about how they can do these predictive models. We have the data on this person, and we can guarantee that within 2 weeks of starting the class, they could take the final and pass. And these are now, I think a lot of this is blowing smoke, some of it, because they're literally here to sell you on all of this data mining.
Right.
But it's how they view people as literally programmed data points.
So the human race is about to enter a totally data mined existence. Education happens to be, today, the world's most data mineable industry by far. So maybe one day healthcare will be up there when they have little nanobots that are in your bloodstream that are doing real-time analysis. So Newton today gets 5 to 10 million actionable data per student per day. If you tag all of your content and you do it down to the atomic concept level, down to the sentence, down to the clause, you unlock an incredible amount of trapped, hidden data. Everything in education is correlated to everything else. Every single concept is correlated in a predictable way to everything else using psychometrics, right? You do a little bit of work for Newton, and we use just the established science of psychometrics to cascade out hundreds of other data. Right? So we can produce incredible quantities of data per user per day. It's really, really hard to get that, okay? For every one of the students, we can figure out within a few hours what they're strong at and what they're weak at the beginning of the course, right? So we can produce a unique syllabus for each student each day, literally unique. There's not enough time in the universe for any two students to have the same syllabus on any one day. So we know you're going to fail. We know it in advance, and we can prevent it in advance. Let's go find a group of people who are psychometrically equivalent to that kid. They learn the same ways, they have the same learning styles, they know the same stuff, because Newton can figure out things like you learn math best in the morning between 8:40 and 9:13 a.m. You learn science best in 42-minute bite sizes. The 44-minute mark, your click rate always begins to decline. You start missing questions you normally get right. You learn social studies best with video clips, or 22% video to 78% text, or whatever your optimal cocktail of bundle. We literally have more data about our students than any company has about anybody else, about anything. This is a course at ASU. They had to change their semester structure into a modular semester structure because we were suddenly telling them things like, if you give this woman here the final right now, she'll get an A. It's only 14 days into the course. I promise you she'll get an A. All look like fleas, but that's all an individual learning path. Notice that some of them are going really fast, some of them are going really slow. You can look at some of those students and think, boy, that poor schmuck is really in a lot of trouble. So where we think we're going with this, talk about it kind of as a joke, but it really should work, is like a food diary. You tell us what you had for breakfast every morning. At the beginning of the semester. By the end of the semester, we should be able to tell you what you had for breakfast, because you always do better on the days you have scrambled eggs. And more importantly, we should be able to tell you what you should have for breakfast.
Well, and I pointed out all the time, in fact, in that testimony about the open education resources, when I got all that time, I said education is the most data mineable industry to date, and I got that from the Newton guy.
Yeah, that's what he says. Until we get nanobots, who knows? Who knows when the nanobots come? And so I just want to sort of emphasize, that's come out within the past year, this idea of soul-bound tokens. And so for people who are all into the crypto and are, the NFTs, this idea, and I was sort of tweeting with the authors of the paper, Vitalik Buterin and is it Greg Weil? His last name is Weil, W-Y-E-L, and Glenn Weil and Pooja Olhaver. They were the authors on this paper about soulbound tokens. And soulbound tokens are different from NFTs in that they're awarded, but they can't be transferred. And I think they could possibly be revoked, but they gave an example like someone being at a conference. So you attend a webinar or a conference, and everyone who attends gets awarded a soulbound token in their locker to prove that they were there. And so I kept asking on Twitter until I got blocked, to me, these seem like metadata tags. Like, would you use these for social impact finance labeling? So if you have students who get pulled into a social emotional learning curriculum in middle school, do they get a soulbound token applied to them so that at some future point, if the offset for the pay for success finance deal is addiction or jail, if they get brought into the criminal justice system, there'll be some sort of change to the status of their soulbound token, depending on if they have a token for these different kinds of curriculums. And they would never answer me on that. But here, this is an image that talks about soulbound tokens and how they can actually improve educational credentialing, which is interesting. Like, they're very open about this now. And so it says soulbound tokens may be also recognized as an ERC 1238, non-transferable, non-fungible tokens, NTT, which developers have been working on since 2018. So, I think that they want to tag the people and the soulbound. And I think that it's using that term, it's very provocative.
And through lifetime of learning.
Lifetime of learning. So I want to touch a little bit here on virtual apprenticeships, because actually Lynn Taylor, who is always so good at tracking all of the particular workforce stuff, the Common Core diva, I think she had brought this to my attention because someone in North Carolina was pushing the idea of virtual apprenticeship. So this was a year or two ago. So I can see that these virtual reality programs are going to be linked. And a lot of the pay for success, it's not just K-12, but it's also career and technical education and the reskilling. And they're really working, the focus is on STEM. So Jobs for the Future has been funded by the Gates Foundation for decades. And I had a blog post once called Jobs for the Future, Who Decides? Because literally it's the Chamber of Commerce that's deciding what jobs are going to be allowed.
Right.
And so they've teamed up with social finance, and social finance is Ronald Cohen, and they're the ones that largely developed with third sector the social impact finance space, the social impact bonds, and the pay for success. So they're definitely looking at pay for success for career and technical education now.
Right.
And Lynn,
and we saw that they came to Dallas in 2013 with the mayor and Todd Williams of the Commit Partnership and all of the players from Dallas. And they haven't said it as explicitly as they did back then, but we know that that's what they're up to.
And that's Jobs for the Future?
Yeah, well, no, the third sector finance.
Oh, the third sector people, okay.
Yeah, social finance and pay for success,
yeah,
and social impact bonds. And they, got all the people together and all the different entities together, nonprofits and such.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I want to point out, again, another one of these Hegelian dialectics: create the problem to offer the solution and manage the narrative. Because like we've seen with the rising cost of four-year college and the way in which some of it seems kind of ridiculous now in the culture wars and that sort of thing, that there is a lot of interest in the career and technical education. Like there are a lot of people who are like, no nonsense. Like, yeah, I want my kid to have a job. Like I want my kid to, like, enough with all this fluff kind of stuff. Let's have something that's really practical. And we need plumbers and we need mechanics. And so they're imagining that the career and technical education is what it was 15 years ago, right? That it would
like
happen.
Shop.
Yeah, exactly. Like shop.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But what they're not realizing is that jobs for the future, what they need to build extended reality and human plus nature plus stuff is a whole bunch of technicians, disposable technicians who will just do it, who will just do the coding, will just do the synthetic biology. They just need basic tech people. And so it's not going to be the jobs you think. I think there are certain kinds of jobs people imagine have, salt of the earth, good, that this is what kept America running, all of these things. And those jobs are gone.
No, and what it is it's phlebotomist or some, repetitive job. And then, but because like what I mentioned earlier, because they've supplanted education for this workforce or CTE, is that they will have no other skills. And when that job is eliminated, then where do they go from there?
Well,
Because
they'll
that's
just
all
have
they
to be
know.
reskilled, and then they'll probably have to finance on a blockchain ledger their future of VR training. I mean, and that's not fair to the kids. It's not fair to young people to set them up for that. But
No.
I mean, the adults in the room aren't really looking at what got built. Like, and I'm in my
Well,
50s, so it got built while we were watching, but we just weren't paying attention.
Another layer to that, I think this feeds into the inability to be able to make a living wage and afford whatever the rent or the mortgages are, is that in order to fund these CTE programs, like with our high school down the road, they built an entire wing for CTE paid for with bond debt. And so it's like it just keeps that revolving debt. The debt drives up your property taxes, and then you can't afford to find a house or to be able to keep your house or to afford the rent, because the apartments are so high as well.
Right, because we talked about that in the Flow Life series for sure. Yeah. Well, and you think about it, because essentially what's happening is that the Chamber of Commerce can go and tell the schools what to train for. Right.
Yeah.
And so they have sort of a captive market. Like, that's not a free market. That's just like, and they'll probably say, oh, we want this many more people. Like, they want to be able to cream the choice people and dispose of the people that they don't want. And I think that the PTech stuff with IBM and that's their way to, Tom Luce, that's what he'd like. He'd like the children from pre-K on up so that they could identify the winners, and then everyone else, well, then they just could like shove them to the side.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So, okay, so here's just some more images about apprenticeships. And it seems like that this is a big thing in Texas right now. So this is an article from last summer in Bloomberg. I think we're hiring, especially if you're in high school and want an apprenticeship. Companies scrambling to fill openings, tapping students with promises of training and good wages. And this is a guy who is doing copier repair for $20 an hour.
I mean, how many times did the copier break down when you were working? And
well, I mean, the thing is, like, but do you so imagine that's a high school apprenticeship now. Like, that probably used to be somebody's regular job.
Yeah.
Right. Like 10 years ago. And so now what, that's a challenge.
Get the high school students a low wage. Yeah.
Yeah. And then here is Practice Makes Perfect, My PTech and the Apprenticeship Journey out of IBM. So, IBM is all about the apprenticeships. And then I remember seeing this earlier. This is from Stimuli. Microsoft's Accelerate initiative allows North Texans to upskill and reinvent themselves with the Dallas Digital Alliance. And Stimuli is working in conjunction with the PTech folks. So,
yeah, and the PTech guy, I'm still I'm still scarred by it. But, when I ran for that seat on the Dallas College Board, the guy from IBM who claimed to be the father of PTech, he was in the audience at one of our forums, and he was going after me on social media. And I always knew it didn't add up, something didn't smell quite right. And now I find that he's now working for Dallas ISD. You can see, these people, if they show their allegiance to the plan and go after those who are exposing it, then they get rewarded through, the patronage network in Dallas.
Yeah. I mean, and you've been at it long enough to see, because you've stuck with it for so many years.
Yeah, and you realize when people work that hard when they are that aggressive, then you know something's not quite right. They're either paid or there's some sort of agreement or arrangement made for them.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to think of before the structured economy stuff, but it was the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, and that's something, again, Lynn Taylor talks a lot about over at Common Core Diva. And so we had this isn't specifically apprenticeship, but this is like the reskilling side of things, and it might fit in with the early college or the associate's degree programs, that they were developing pay for success for like placing certain jobs. And so we were seeing this in Philadelphia, a while back, like 2018. And the jobs were, surprise, surprise, with Comcast to do cable installation or tech, broad fiber installation. Yeah. And that was done in partnership with the Federal Reserve. So a lot of the Federal Reserve programs are linking in with this like specific placement, like on-demand workforce training. And that's really much the case in Dallas. I know that the Federal Reserve is a key player in the workforce reskilling area.
Workforce reskilling and the focus on preschool. And I know that the former head of the Federal Reserve, who was from Goldman, with the commit guy, the Strive Together guy, Todd Williams. Yeah, so they were working in conjunction. I saw him at the legislature testifying on behalf of some of these education bills. And so you realize, okay, what's his angle on this? But it was about the early access to the kids. It was about pay for success and this new economy that they're trying to set up.
Well, and when Ready Nation had their big event in New York in 2018, that was for business people only. Like if you were a child advocate, you could only come with the approval of 4 vetted business people. And they literally rang the NASDAQ bell, and on Times Square, they had big billboards about it, how excited they were for the public-private partnership. And it was both the early childhood and the workforce development. So they have bookended it from the youngest kids to the older kids. And so here I have an image from Third Sector, which, we had mentioned before, that along with social finance really was a spearhead of impact finance. And George Overholtzer was sort of the lead on that for Third Sector. And they were talking about opportunity youth. And so if people haven't heard that term, essentially it's sort of like overage, undercredited young people. So people like 16 to 24 who are out of school or like not attending regularly. So, and that is this very specific target for these alternative programs. And a lot of times, they're in poor communities and all of that sort of thing. So like opportunity youth are a test bed, an experimental test bed. And because often they're, disadvantaged, they're kids that like other people aren't really paying that much attention to, like it concerns me because I feel like they can get away with experimenting on those kids without a lot of people really paying close attention, or if anything, just saying, oh, how wonderful, look what you're doing for those kids,
Right. And I think the name opportunity youth, that word, the word spells, and the opportunity is to prey on those who are the most vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing is, too, they can go through and then identify who would be a good change agent, right? So most people will be toiling away at some job. Like we have these programs called like Youth Build, where they teach them trades and housing building. But then you find 1 or 2 that you can uplift and be, the spokespeople for the next iteration of the program. And right. It feels not so good to me. So again, we have apprenticeship.gov. And again, during the lockdowns, they were like, hey, you could have virtual apprenticeships, right? Like what's stopping you, right? We should have virtual apprenticeships. And, that seems to be coming, is this idea of a virtual apprenticeship. And then a virtual apprenticeship is just a hop, skip, and a jump from putting your brain in a robot. Well, if you can do it for your apprenticeship program, you could just do it for your career. Just sit in your sofa forever. Mm-hmm. Here's your headset, and then we can data mine you. And then here's another. This is from Tech Policy. It's a video from fairly recently, I think it's this March, how augmented and virtual reality can help expand apprenticeship programs. And this is the tech policy. And I think it's very disingenuous if these folks are talking about OER and they're not actually talking about all this other stuff.
Right. And then if you try to talk about the other stuff, their eyes, glaze over, or they call you a conspiracy theorist.
Right. Because they don't want to actually look at the facts. I mean, and these are all from, they're not paywall. These are sources that are available to anyone, but you just actually have to be willing to, put it together. So this one, so one of the people in here is with, I think transfer. Yeah. So the other,
a vowel.
Yeah, exactly. So there's someone from Interplay Learning, Burning Glass Institute, ITIF. I'm not sure what that is. This woman's office, and then transfer, but without the E. So then the next thing is transfer. It raises $12 million to deliver hands-on workforce training in VR. And to me, it looks like they're trying to pretend that person is welding in a virtual reality headset. Does that look like a welder to you?
When my gate broke the other day, I needed somebody to weld it back together. And I don't think the virtual headset would have worked.
I know. So they're like, oh, but look, this is so much safer. You can just weld in virtual reality.
Good.
And you just think about like what data is being captured on that. But the thing is, what they're planning is that like a lot of this stuff will be done by the robotic. So they train you for jobs that they know there's really not much of a chance that you're actually going to get to practice that skill.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of your data is training the machine learning sets.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like it's like a parasite. So now we've got the teacher apprenticeships, right? Because guess what? Teaching is miserable, and most of the many of the teachers who knew what was going on in the last 3 years left.
It's not safe because the kids are vectors, and now it's not safe because they're shooters, and so you can see it setting up.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a sad reality, but you can see it being set up, and parents will eventually get to the point where they say, okay, maybe it's not safe for my child to go, and let's just step into this avatar space.
Yeah. And I remember, so next to this, there's one article from Education Week. Teacher apprenticeships are booming in the wake of shortages. Here's what you need to know. New federal funding could help more people become teachers for free. And you have to feel bad for the people who paid all this money or are still paying off their student loans to be teachers, right, who are miserable.
And you can we pay them in Dallas to go through the education degree. And I wondered what the stipulation was, how long they have to teach in order to get their college paid for. But no, they're doing it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and then this was from a couple years back. I mean, I remember it was Teach to Avatar. The IUSE Teach to Avatar project provides an opportunity for pre-service teachers to engage in specific skill development and practice. STEM pre-service teachers are able to practice questioning and discussion with students in a virtual reality simulation. So they're training the teachers to teach Avatar students. Meanwhile, over in the school in a video game, they're training kids to be avatars. Right. And I mean, do you remember the first time we came across this? And it was laughable. People thought it was laughable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, but it's not. It's not funny, and it's real, even though it's virtual. It's not real.
It's virtual. This is a really big map I made of Dallas with your help, Lynn, a while ago. It's a little. We haven't ever gotten a chance to talk about all of it, right? We've talked about parts of it.
Deep in Dallas.
Yeah, Lynn would be like, here's another article. Here's another article. So I would just throw things in. And so I just want to, let me zoom in on Wrath just a second.
All those bastards.
Okay, so there's your favorite guy, Lynn. All right, so we've got the Dallas Independent School District here. We have Stimuli, which is the school in the video game.
Filthy Phil Ritter.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, where do I have him here?
Oh, he was up a little higher above Taylor,
okay.
Kind of right.
Oh, right yeah. There's Phil Ritter. All right.
Remind me. Mm-hmm.
And was he with Greenlight or?
He's with Greenlight, but he took the job after he was a trustee, and he's in his second term. So he was in the other seat, and I ran in district. I ran in 1, and he ran in 2, I think. But yeah, he was the guy with the conflict of interest who has the Greenlight app. He works for Vital Sign 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and then they also have the depression screening, so that it's not just your academics, your fitnessgram. And so this is the blockchain stuff. And then I just wanted to move over to this section over here, connected impact, blockchain workforce. So this is kind of tucked in. A while ago, I came across a really crazy slide deck called the Internet of Education. Let me see. Oh, yeah. So look, now I see what competencies this badge represents, learning competencies. And it was by this guy, Greg Nadeau. And so it was all about the blockchain and education. Now, I don't know if you have the emails for the blockchain task force, but you should probably just send them the slide deck and go, have you not seen this slide deck? Because it really does lay out.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny. This is Eve's magazine. I think that this is still this is the current version. Somebody put Eve's magazine in the slide deck.
For real?
I think for real.
I mean, I recognize that. Wow. I need to revisit that.
I think they're adding new things. I can't believe that how could they have that?
How's that?
I'm a little crazy. I don't understand.
It's like when I tweet people and I'm exposing them and they retweet it because they think I'm complimenting them because they don't really read the fine details. They just assume everybody's for it.
Wow. Well, so here's the Internet of Education, and then they have the internet. But literally, this is Eve's. It's talking about the blockchain identity and freedom and vaccine passports. Oh my gosh, they think that we think it's okay.
That's good. I'm telling you, that's what happens more often than you would realize.
I'm really shocked. I'm a little shocked, Lynn. Okay, well.
Okay, funny.
Okay, that's a little strange. All right, so we've got so Greg, so they're talking about all of the learning data, these learning registries, which is what Greenlight is, and exchanging value where your skills are machine readable data. Oh, look, there we've got Learn Card. I think somebody must be tracking my various slide decks. This is interesting. I wonder how many. Oh, so they've got 241 slides now.
Are they open? Like is your stuff accessible?
Well,
like
if you have the link, you can look at it. I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's editable. For a while, they actually edited it. I think someone that I knew, I think I made a copy of it at one point, but I should maybe do another one. But this is what OER is about, right? I mean, this conceptual model for learning technologies, right? Evidence of learning, stackable credentials, assignments, activities, dashboards, maps. I mean, wow. It's really the person is just being processed through this for this gig work.
Yeah, that's actually a really good visual for what
I mean, the person is trapped. This doesn't look fun. No. This doesn't look like freedom.
Because I saw it in the pre-K through, the whole K-12. And then I realized, oh my gosh, there's all of this at Dallas College, and all 7 colleges were being managed behind the scenes by the same people who were doing the impact investing and the social finance and all of that. And the Strive Together people in the K-12 and pre-K, it was all the same. I mean, I just didn't see it at the community college level.
Yeah.
So
wow. So but the OER is all about tracking all of your stuff, standards alignment. Salt. Don't let Adam Newman get near your salt.
Your salt and light,
You're
right?
Gonna take your salt. Yeah, it's just turning people into data, and I don't think most teachers signed up for that. Like most teachers didn't. I swear this is really weird because I feel like some of these are my like slides that I've used. So
Well, that is weird.
yeah, putting your records on the wallet. Yeah, maybe I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. So but this is Greg Nadeau, and he was working with learning economy stuff that was in Colorado and Broward County, and this was his slide deck. And he was connected to IMS Global, which were the badges and the Common Education Data Standards. And he came out of the Massachusetts Department of Education. And, I said this before, but, I don't know. We always had some idea of what Massachusetts was. Like they were supposed to be quality education, right? And I didn't really understand it as sort of a front for the military tech industrial complex of Boston, right? Like the technocracy military stuff. I didn't understand it that way, but I think it definitely is. And so you've got this American Council on Education, and they're pushing blockchain. Yeah, this connected impact, which is unlocking education and workforce opportunity through blockchain. Oh, and in this, I'm pretty sure... Yeah, so it talks about the value of connected ecosystems. Technology can supplant some processes, but it does not entirely replace the value of human connection and trusted relationships. Human ecosystems supported by blockchain infrastructure can provide members with access to more functionality, opportunity, and control. And then it goes on to say the Dallas Independent School District, Dallas Community College District, and the University of North Texas, Dallas, the Mesquite Independent School District, the Garland Independent School District, and the Grand Prairie School District make up a network built on existing relationships and agreement. They use Greenlight, a private permissioned Hyperledger Fabric blockchain to remove barriers for students to do college and employment. So you guys are definitely in the mix with, this connected learning on blockchain.
Right. And what happens in Dallas, as we know through other things that have happened decades past, is what happens there is often a test bed. And I know that No Child Left Behind, they pulled the guy from Dallas ISD in that same trustee seat as Mike Morath, and Bush pulled him to help him with No Child Left Behind, which set up a marketplace for ICE Station and reading response to intervention software. So there is a big connection with the federal and the Department of Education and Technology and Dallas, and they seem to use it as this test bed. And with the blockchain being rolled out in Dallas ISD, Richardson ISD, where my kids went, and then Dallas College, that will be scaled statewide, which they're doing, in other community colleges in Amarillo and in Midland. And then that will be scaled to the across the nation. And so they're watching this through the Department of Education. So it is significant. And that's why I've been talking about this so much for the last, year and a half or two.
Yeah, it's huge. And, I want to just point out here, we have Big Thought. Can you say a little bit just of what Big Thought is?
Yeah. So Big Thought, what's interesting is the guy who is leading Big Thought, Byron Sanders, he was listed on the application as a reference for the Commissioner of Education, Mike Morath, who I mentioned before, who was appointed by our governor. And so Byron Sanders is leading this out of seat time learning with Big Thought. And he has a history of being in the reform. He's jumped from nonprofit to nonprofit. That seems to be kind of a pattern with these guys. And so this out of seat time learning, it really expanded during the pandemic. Yeah. So it was strange because the schools were locked down and shut down, but yeah, the kids still needed to be in some sort of after school care, because the parents who did have to still go to work. And so I've been watching some of the op-eds and things that you see in the paper. This guy will write them, and they partner with the faith communities. And so it's okay for the kids to be in after school care, but not in a school building during a pandemic. I mean, it makes no sense, but you can have a low wage after school care worker watching them, but not a licensed, professional teacher, that it's okay for that.
Well, and the other thing, it seems to me that they frame this as like creativity and fun. And that's what I noticed too, that like within the schools, the creative stuff would get shut down, and then the curriculum became more and more scripted and more testing, and then the fun things got shunted over to the nonprofits. Right? So you could do that in out of school, but you couldn't do it at school.
Right. Well, and physically, big thought when I would go down to Dallas College, like when I had to file to run, or if I have to go to any event there, big thought was right near there. It's like right next to the Dallas College building. And then I think they're moving into that Pegasus.
Well, they would have to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where this whole social impact, this building is the meeting of the minds, the water cooler, where they're all going to be there. It's a charter school and the impact investing nonprofit and the UT Southwestern. You have all in biotech. They're all in this building together. And so, it's significant because it's all this, these people are all connected in different ways.
Well, and what I was noticing, like in Philadelphia, that we had money from, I think, the Wallace Foundation, that they were developing data-based systems for the after-school programs to collect data. And then the big push, and that was coming through the United Way, was to do these FERPA waivers so that the out-of-school time learning programs could have access to all the student data.
We know that for kids to succeed in school, they need opportunities and resources. Parents and guardians need choices about the services that might be able to support their kids, whether it's healthcare, after school, tutoring, mentoring, English classes, or even something new. In our community, we are fortunate that our community schools bring the opportunities, resources, and choices together to us in the same place our kids learn. To help our children, the partners that provide these opportunities need to be able to talk to each other about how to help our kids. Talking to each other about our kids' education helps them make sure that the programs are helping our kids get on track and stay on track to graduate school and go to college. We know it takes a lot of people to raise a child, but many times those people aren't communicating with each other and sharing what they're doing to contribute to the child's well-being. We need everyone, schools, parents and guardians, and the community to work together and make sure that every child succeeds in school and in life. A federal law called the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, protects our kids' educational information. It also says that if a parent or guardian gives written permission to a group of organizations, that those organizations can share select educational information about your child for the purpose of helping them. In an attempt to connect the people who support our children, we are asking for your written consent to share your child's education information with each provider directly servicing your student. By choosing to sign this waiver, you give us, the partners who work with your kid's school, permission to share information. Sharing this information lets us do things like enroll them in the right after-school program, provide more language support, and tell them about scholarships and special programs to help them get ready for college. Parents that provide consent will benefit from more coordinated and effective service delivery to their children. So when you hear about written consent from your child's school, after school, or tutoring program, please read, sign, and return the form to them. When you choose to do so, you help us help your kids. You help our school and community be a healthier and safer place. And you also help us find ways to support the work you're doing at home with your kids.
Because they really, in order to create these like LRNG programs or learning ecosystems, they need for there to be, like, you need to be able to earn a badge after school, just as you can in school. They really don't want there to be any difference. And they also, in these creative, quote unquote, creative out of school time programs, where here it says, today we are a recognized leader in arts education, after school programming, summer learning, juvenile justice learning systems, and social emotional learning.
Oh yeah, that's a big piece of it, is social emotional learning. And also the Perot Museum which is downtown. That was, Ross, named after Ross Perot. And I think that will be, if you look at those who pushed to get the Perot Museum built and established, and the memberships and all of that, you'll see the same people are in these spaces where they're pushing for out of seat time learning or charter schools. I mean, it's all kind of the same web of people supporting the same things.
Well, and you can imagine that if you could put a headset on somebody and teach them how to pet a dog, you could probably come up with some sort of project-based learning with similar things, right? And a lot of these museums have been pushing virtual reality, and the libraries, like early pilots of VR, pushing them on kids even when it was not appropriate. Like there were safety precautions to use VR on younger kids. They were just like letting people loose with these VR headsets. And so if they can get the data interoperability, and that's where they'll probably use the blockchain, right? They'll be like, oh, well, don't worry about FERPA. Your data is protected. You're in control of your data. So you can go anywhere and collect a badge, right? And then they want the social emotional data because, the story that they want to tell, like companies really care what your attitude and demeanor
Soft skills,
are.
right?
Yeah,
you got to show up to win, is what they're saying.
This is what AI wants. This data, like the AI wants culture and creativity and human interaction. That's what the machine learning needs, and it can get it through wearables. And literally, what they're saying is they can measure your heart rate and they can correlate it to your eye movements and your galvanic skin response. Like they want in your skin. AI wants to go on field trips to fun places and make projects so that it can store it in the data bank. I mean, I was just looking at a talk with Ben Gertzel yesterday where he was talking about the rise of artificial general intelligence, and he was talking about his kids and his concern, like not his concern, but knowing that as much as ChatGPT can do some things, it still can't make the leap of a human, of a child, like intellectually or conceptually. But what it can do is crunch a whole lot of data and replicate. So they're like, it can't make the leap of a 3-year-old child to do a new unknown thing, but it could churn the data of a lot of 3-year-olds to make an informed guess.
What I think of as AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is the term I introduced in 2004 or something. This refers to a system that has a robust capability to generalize beyond its programming and training and its experience, and sort of take a leap into the unknown. And that, every baby does that. Every child does it. I mean, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old now, and 3 grown kids, and every one of them has made an impressive series of wild leaps into the unknown, like as they learn to do stuff that we all consider basic. Now that doesn't mean an AI system can do the same things a 2- and 5-year-old can do without itself making a leap into the unknown. It can do it by watching what a billion 2-year-olds did and interpolating, but kids still do that.
And darn close.
Darn close. I mean, it would fake. I mean, what he said is like, I think it could pass the Turing test for an average person. Probably not if you were with it for 5 years, but at least at the beginning, like it could pass a Turing test. So yeah, that's what social emotional learning is about. There's pay for success deals wrapped up in it, and through the Heckman equation and through Clive Bellfield's SEL equations and stuff. And yeah, they're going to make some bank on it, but they want the data. It has nothing to do with what they think about you as a person in business. So anyway, so I guess that's sort of just this corner of this map. But I think, again, the connection of the school in a video game, the credentialing, the college, linking it to lifelong learning, and the connected learning on blockchain, and then these players like Arnold Ventures and IBM are all in the mix. And in Dallas, it's your point taken that Dallas is a test bed, and that we should all be paying attention because what you guys are up to definitely matters. So
just that Dallas, I have this book on Dallas, like then and now, and looking at the name of Dallas, where it came from, there's a little bit of a dispute on where it came from. But if it was that guy Dallas who was born he's from Philly.
I know. Well, you know what? What's so crazy? You know what? Can you? let's pause. Well, wait a minute. I can open it up. Let me see. So I have a whole other slide deck that I'm working on, Lynn, that is linking a walk around that I did in South Philly. It's been a couple weeks ago, but I ended up in this churchyard, and like I was killing time because I took my car to get the oil changed, which you just did.
Today.
And I was like, I had time to kill, and I'm like, well, I want to just sit and read a book somewhere. And but there's not a lot of places in South Philly to do that. There's these cemeteries, and so I went to the cemetery, and
Oh yeah, I remember all this. Yeah.
oh, did I tell you this already?
Well, I mean, you
Sorry.
told me, but I don't remember seeing.
So about the Dallas family. So I dropped the car off to get the oil changed, and we have like a certain amount of time to kill. And so I go get a coffee, and it was a nice day. It was a couple weeks ago. Like, it was one of the first nice spring days. And so I still had an extra hour. So I went to this cemetery just because it has these beautiful trees, and to sit like, well, there's two. They're right next to each other, Old Pine and St. Peter's. This is the Anglican one.
Wait, okay, so this is an old picture, and those trees are still there, but they're
Different
bigger?
trees, some different trees.
Oh.
Yeah. Like this is maybe earlier. But there were two cemeteries, and I thought I was going to go to Old Pine, but the gateway wasn't open. And so, but on the St. Peter's it was, and it was just so sunny, and there were daffodils. And so I ended up going in there. So this is it looking over the top. You can see like it's a nice green space. And most of the tombstones, because this is from late 18th, early 19th century, you can't read them anymore. Like the names are all washed off. But
right.
the first one that I walked in, look.
Yes.
So this is he's
I
the
thought
brother.
I had a memory of you telling me this,
Yes.
but I was like,
Yeah, I haven't blogged about. I mentioned it a little bit in a talk I did with this woman Emily recently. But yeah, and so almost all the tombstones are, you can't read anything. And the first one I look at has Dallas, and it was this family. Now it wasn't him. It was like an uncle or a brother or
right. They said that he was like a nephew. Alexander was maybe a nephew, but
Yeah.
there's still because James K. Polk, his vice president was Dallas. But they don't know. Like there are different. There's maybe 4 or 5 different theories on where Dallas came from. It's not settled.
But maybe Dallas and Philly have this ongoing connection
I think we do.
all the way back. So I think so. Like to me, it was destined. And then after that, there's this whole story that unfolded after I saw the Dallas. I'm like, oh, I was totally supposed to come here today. But yeah, so
Yeah, I was sitting there. It's on my coffee table, and it's this Dallas then and now. And I thought, you know what? I see different things when I pick stuff up later after I've seen it already.
Exactly. So, again, this is just the connected impact in the workforce. And like I said, this idea of the opportunity youth is kind of key because Dallas also has a lot of immigrant kids, right? And so those would be identified as a prime opportunity youth target.
Well, and look at her brain, and look at all of that, virtual, all the.
It looks like she's playing with digital twins. Like, what if she is like literally running the sentient world simulation?
The commissioner, Mike Morath, always talks about mortals, and and I think, well, does he think he's of a different species? And he'll say he uses the term species. It's so bizarre the way he talks.
I don't know, Lynn. It's so strange. So strange.
Like he's already transhuman.
He might already gone on
Already
with
converted.
the program. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a short clip. So before one of the talks, it's about an 8. This is a shorter one, but there was this 8-minute talk called "Learning is Earning," and I think it might have even premiered at like South by Southwest a while back. And we were like shocked at the time, but it was all about like the badges and the competencies and lifelong learning. And, you get paid to interview for jobs, but you don't actually get paid in work, like money when you get the job, you just get paid in tokens or something like that. I mean, it's really grim. And it was developed by Institute for the Future, this video. And then this is a follow-up. So this is Olive, and this is a short video about her, sort of going into debt on her digital ledger. And so this is linked to this idea of the income sharing agreements and securitizing education debt. And they're going to say that this is the answer to student loan debt, is this new kind of ledger where they garnish your wages. Someone, a philanthropist, will front your tuition and then garnish your wages afterwards. So this is what is enabled by the connective impact on blockchain is what Olive is talking about. Really, all of the, it's not only happening for this reason, but a huge push behind it is to be able to securitize debt in a new way.
So you're logged into the ledger right now. Tell us what you're doing.
So I'm thinking about taking some courses to boost my ledger profile. Mandarin or virtual reality programming, I'm kind of torn. I can make a lot more money doing VR programming, but it's going to cost me a lot more to get.
Do you see that she's listed as student and worker? So, because we're all students and workers for forever.
Get my skills up to the level where people are going to hire me. On the other hand, there are a lot of Mandarin translating gigs, even at my current level. And EduBlocks are cheap enough that I could pay for them myself. But I don't even know if it's worth it. The jobs don't pay that much, and honestly, virtual reality is my passion. So right now, I'm looking at investor offers.
Mine too,
So here,
but
you have
the
someone
other
who's
side.
willing to pay people like me to take a VR programming intensive course. The deal is I have to give up 10% of my income for any VR programming that I log into the ledger for the next 5 years.
So essentially they're saying all of the work that you do for 5 years is logged in a ledger. Everything is logged in the ledger. Everything is tied to cybernetics. So I keep thinking, if you presented this to Texas legislators and said, listen, everyone is going to come with a permanent, your blockchain economy, your innovative blockchain economy, it looks like this. Are you comfortable with this for your kids and grandkids?
Well, and when we spoke against it at that blockchain, that work group, we got somewhere with a few of them. And they'll say, now they won't denounce it elsewhere, but at least for education, they'll say, well, we don't want any of that in education.
Yeah.
It's a start.
It's a start. It's good that you're there.
Yeah.
What do you think? Should I do it?
Sounds like you already are.
And it's interesting. So you see the Institute for the Future. So this is 2016. So, and imagine how long before they knew that this was the thing, before they actually developed the video. It's got to be at least 10 or 15 years out, right? That they knew that this is where it was going. And it's in partnership with the ACT Foundation. And I think the ACT, again, that's the opposite of the SAT is the ACT, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, it's better. But then there's a lot of social skills training that goes along with the ACT, like other kinds of testing, like job readiness and things. So so Olive and her quest of Mandarin versus virtual reality programming, which is actually her passion.
It's her passion.
It's her passion. Who
She
are
looks
we
like-
to hold her back?
She looks
from her
like
passion?
she's an actress, but she looks like a young Demi Moore.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where I said, Lynn, do you know where open education resource, does the Texas legislature know where OER comes from? And so this is a little bit of the background. The Churches of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, MIT, and UNESCO.
Who knew?
Who knew?
But it makes perfect sense to me now that I studied all this.
I
and
know,
been to
exactly. You're
Utah.
like, oh, this is how it works.
Yeah.
So I was going back to some of the research that I had done earlier and some things that were still in Little Sis. And there was this open education group that was initially out of Brigham Young University, and it was funded by the Gates Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation and Lumen Learning. And it was led by this guy, David Wiley. And David Wiley is sort of one of the key figures in the development of OER. And there was a useful, I'll include this slide deck when we share this out, but a timeline for OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And David Wiley was creating a timeline for OER for them. And so he had this brief history. And I'm just going to go over a few things in the history so we have a sense of the timing. So in 1994, Wayne Hodgkins coined the term a learning object. And this learning object would be something that would have metadata, content exchange, and standards to reuse this educational content. And there were a number of entities involved, including Ariadne, IMS, which are the badges, IEEE, LTSC, and SCORM. I mentioned SCORM before. So this is 94. So this is happening at the same time that Clinton is signing the Executive Order 13111 to set up the advanced distributed learning under the guise of remote learning for the military and then eventually civilian government officials and then everybody. So a few years later in 98, David Wiley coined the term open content. And he really started to develop this concept of OER. And then by 2001, Larry Lessig and others founded the Creative Commons. So the OER is very closely connected with Creative Commons. And then that same year, MIT developed their open courseware initiative and put a lot of their free public access courses online. And so I kind of remember when this was happening, that it was a big deal. But so this open content went online, and of course MIT is also like where so much of the blockchain and digital currency elements came, and MIT Media Lab, which is I just always remembering the dissertation out of MIT Media Lab for synthetic programmable hallucinations. Right, literally. Link that with virtual reality OER and a synthetic programmable hallucination, and see where that gets us. Right. And then in 2002, UNESCO had a forum for people who wanted to develop, quote, a universal educational resource for the whole of humanity.
Right.
Right. And so we've got MIT, Utah/LDS affiliates, and then UNESCO are all part of this. And then who else is funding it? The Hewlett Foundation, and again, that Hewlett Packard was involved in like biometric identity management at the Gaza border control systems, right? As well as remaking philanthropy nonprofits for data-driven philanthropy and all sorts of biomedical stuff. So HP is a really complicated company and it has a lot going on. And Lumen Learning was David Wiley's firm later. So here he is now. You know, when we were working in I mean, you're still working in the education space, but on the earlier, like I remember there were several people in Utah. Utah was another big school choice state, right? Right. Utah was a center of a lot of online learning and cyber charter schools. And at the time, that was sort of, you know, if you were doing public education activism, like that was the worst. The worst of the worst were the cyber charters. So David Wiley actually, so he started out, he founded a cyber charter school called Mountain Heights Academy. And I'm not sure that it was totally virtual. It might have been hybrid, but it said that part of their application was really to be a test bed for OER.
Well, you know, I mean, the same people in Texas who are pushing for school choice are pushing for the virtual charters, are pushing for the open education resources. It's all the same people.
Yeah, yeah.
Lobbyists, same legislators, same elected. All of it.
I mean, and you've had like some connections between Utah and Texas with like,
and they brought in the Utah former senator Stevenson, Howard. What's his name? Howard Stevenson, maybe. But he came in and spoke at the virtual education commission several months ago. So it's the same people.
So in 2007 to 2021, so for 14 years, he was the founder and the board member of this charter school that was focused on using OER. At the same time, he was the founder and chief academic officer of Lumen Learning. Now, again, Lumen is light, and there's a lot of stuff involved in photonics and optics and all this stuff. And Lumen Learning said that their focus was on improving affordability of education, meaning don't pay humans to teach children. Adoption of open educational resources and continuous improvement. And, you know, continuous improvement is cybernetics, right? And I found it interesting that starting in February of 2020, so like the month before the lockdowns, right, he became a fellow at Carnegie Mellon. And his task as a fellow was to strengthen the connection between continuous improvement of learning materials and causal inference techniques to better understand the return on investment of continuously improving student learning, and to figure out how to communicate this so all normal human beings can understand it. So
yeah, I mean, at the legislature, I kind of alluded to that because the teachers are always having to learn something new. They're right now already reskilling and upskilling and having to demonstrate. And so I said, because in the past, a teacher would be the master of what they were teaching because they did it and they got better every year. But if you change the curriculum and you change the standards and you change the, the instructional materials, then you're never really going to master it. You've got to relearn, reskill, upskill.
Yeah.
So that continuous improvement's already been laid.
So this guy, essentially has been put in place to shepherd this along, right? So he's developed it. He's used this charter school to develop it alongside his own private interest company. And now he's embedded at Carnegie Mellon to develop the narrative of continuous improvement, which is the cybernetics, really. It's straight up cybernetics. And this is just the Mountain Heights Academy was the name of the charter school. And it said that creating open educational resources was a fundamental aspect of the school, which opened in 2010. So essentially the school was open to sell OER, pretty much, to use it as a test bed. And then here I just have the MIT OpenCourseWare, which was part of the timeline that it says in 1999, the faculty wanted to use the internet to advance knowledge and create these MOOCs. So by 2002, they had published 50 courses online, the MIT. Also on this slide, I include Sepp Kampar, who used to be the head of their social computing lab at MIT Media Lab, who is connected both to Cello, the digital currency program, and also the Wildflower Montessori School, where they were putting Internet of Things sensors in the children's shoes to track them everywhere, and artificial vision. So it's about linking the education to the digital tracking and the money. And then I did include a link to the synthetic programmable hallucination dissertation, Dan Novi, who came out of Hollywood, filmmaking. So this is kind of what MIT, a few of the things that MIT is about. Just to touch again, MIT Media Lab, they were the leaders in the digital currency. So this idea of the green light stuff, it's not just going to be for the credentials. It's going to be your money and your wallets and all of the stuff. Now, MIT also helped develop the idea of spatial computing. And this is a dissertation from Simon Greenwald from 1995 about developing spatial computing, which is described as human interaction with the machine in which the machine retains and manipulates reference to real objects and spaces. It is an essential component for making our machines fuller partners in our work and play. This thesis presents a series of experiments in the discipline and analysis of its fundamental properties. So this VR stuff, the VR OER, is spatial computing. But they're not telling people exactly what's happening. They're just giving a little peek. Oh, we're just doing some, you could just printable worksheets, and I think what's so upsetting to me is that they're trying to because they're using the culture war triggeredness of people to say not just the culture war, but also the developmentally inappropriateness of a lot of the curriculum, which we have seen, where they have these standards that are lied for really young kids to know things that are developmentally inappropriate, actually.
Yeah, they had adult content as excerpts and even sexual content, innuendo. So,
but even concepts I can't remember. There was something in the you shared with me a woman who was now lobbying for, I don't know if she was lobbying for the OER, but it was something like parental right of reviewing the materials. And it was something it was a complex construct.
Yes.
And she was like, it's not appropriate that a second grader be able to know that. And it had nothing to do with the sexuality stuff. It was really just it was too complicated.
It was intellectually not
age appropriate. Yeah, it was intellectually.
She that is a state board member who came from a school board, and she's funded by the billionaire who is the real estate guy who wants the open education resources. And so she does an op-ed, an opinion piece saying, oh, this is, so she plays the culture wars, and everyone goes, yeah, what you're saying is, yes, that's, but it's, but she's playing a role.
Yes.
And she responds to a call to play the role, but she's for the bill. She's for the OER. She's for the technology. And I mean, it baffles me.
Well,
yeah.
Because they don't know, or they're not willing to look. Like, I mean, if you told them,
Or
well,
they're
this is what
paid
it
to
is,
not see.
right? I mean, this is what it is. It's the child in the VR headset with them tracking the heart rate. So tell me exactly again how parents are going to have any say in the content that's provided, because every single kid is getting a different set of inputs depending
Right.
on how their biology and physiology and emotional state is. There's no one curriculum. There's there's nothing consistent that can be examined. And that's what people are not willing to look at and understand. It's like they're telling you a fairy story if you think that you're going to get to see the curriculum, because there isn't one. There just literally isn't one, and it's just depressing. So again, UNESCO is involved in this, in the OECD, and don't you remember back in the day when like the whole PISA tests would come up, right? And Diane Ravitch would say like, oh, those Common Core tests are so bad, but we should do the PISA tests. Those are the good ones. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Because it did a sample and a snapshot, and it wasn't testing all kids.
Yeah, but they were always like pushing you into the global paradigm that was the better one. Like these kinds were the bad kinds. But if we just did the globalized version, that it was going to be better. But it was.
Well, and we try to tell people that the plan for UNESCO wants the school choice vouchers and the Title I portability and all the money following the child. That actually plays right into the hands of this larger plan. But in Texas, it's the right saying, oh, we need to get the money to follow the child to get them out of that government school, and
it's so inverted.
And they're just they're responding in the way that UNESCO wants them to respond.
Yeah, that people are just being herded. They're using everybody's like because people are so emotionally triggered, and they just can't think straight. And like the OECD is sort of the global economy. So UNESCO is the cultural side of things, and the OECD is the economic side of things, and they're all about.
You got Andreas Schleicher. He came to Dallas and went to SMU, and he's like, well, in Singapore, we do this, and he's telling about all these best practices across the globe, and he's there in Dallas at SMU and telling people. I mean, I asked a question of him, and it was about Singapore and the special needs kids, and he didn't really answer it.
They never answer. He
didn't have to.
Well, so this was just, I guess, from a little bit of a timeline about the OER and the UNESCO and the OECD. But let's see. I think that this is a UNESCO document, the Ljubljana OER Action Plan of 2017 to mainstream OER to help all member states create inclusive knowledge societies and achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Namely, Sustainable Development Goal 4, quality education, 5, gender equality, 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, 10, reduced inequalities, 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, and 17, partnerships. And under this, they would adopt the recommendations on OER on the 25th day of November 2019. So that doesn't really sound like anything about local control for Texas.
No. It's not.
I mean, how many of these people do you think even know what all the sustainable development goals are? I mean, this is like lining up with half the goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's becoming more recognized. I mean, people are talking about them, but I don't know that they're drawing that granular, level of understanding.
Yeah. Well, and so in UNESCO, again, that was Julian Huxley's baby, and he was a straight up eugenicist, and he was promoting scientific world humanism. I mean, like, Lynn, I feel like if we could just like get people like, look at me, let me show you the steps, right? It didn't change from this. It is scientific. And a lot of this, they were talking about planned education, cultivating gifted students, doing this identification, making sure dumb people couldn't have jobs, and really a totally structured workforce. And he was doing it, you know, back in 45 when UNESCO got set up. And he was close friends with Teilhard de Chardin, you know, and they were, you know, Teilhard de Chardin is promoting this idea of the omega point and the noosphere, how we converge into a global thought form. Well, how do you think we're going to do that? I mean, can you imagine any other way of like converging into a global thought form? Let me just see, where did that looks like the convergence, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the omega point, baby. I mean, but people don't
But
even,
if you look at how fast it's gotten to where we are now, imagine how much faster it's going to go with these bills if they get locked into place. And I mean, it will rapidly progress.
Yeah. Well, this is just a slide about the omega point and the singularity. But they were talking about this idea of a spiral galaxy that included the entire universe. And within this article, it talks about from the center of the spiraling universe, mankind serves as a conscious observer. And so there's all this stuff about spirals and radials and spirit. You know, in Teilhard de Chardin, for those, you know, who aren't already aware, well, he was a Jesuit priest and a geologist, I think, and he was involved in the discovery of the Peking man. He spent a lot of his adult life in China. And then later on, the last decade of his life, he went back to Europe, and he was befriended by Huxley, and then his book was published posthumously, and Huxley wrote the introduction. So this idea that we would become more and more complex until we got to the omega point and Christogenesis. But what I thought was kind of interesting was that this idea of the spiral, you know, and so
toroidal, maybe.
Toroidal.
Yeah.
Well, and so I have an image on this slide that's actually from the Learn Capital launch event in Austin. And they did a short video that was sort of their walkthrough through their new campus, which is, I think, 4 buildings or so in Austin, not too far from the Capitol. And so I was, you know, a lot of this stuff is sort of coded, and you know, they had pictures of their, you know, patio party and their speakers and their kitchen and the presentations and a lot of virtual reality headsets and this stuff. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I did pull, like, their entryway had a wall of art. And I thought it was quite interesting that there were at least 3 images that were distinct spirals in that wall, which is one of which is like a wave, a Japanese sort of wave painting, but it's like a breaking wave in a spiral. This other one that's definitely a spiral, but it almost looks like cells or something on the far end. And then one is a spiral stairwell going up. And so I just put those together because I thought it was kind of, I feel like the Learn Capital people have a lot of encoded stuff going on.
We do.
Yeah. And then this will be just the last section for tonight. Just hitting on Hewlett-Packard and funding OER at Rice. Mm-hmm. Now, Jason and I paid a brief visit. Rice is in Houston. It was founded, I think, in the 19-teens or maybe early 20s. And actually, the guy who gave all the money for it, he was murdered by his butler or something like that. So, like, the entire founding, the money, the butler murdered him and tried, or his, like, valet or whatever, to change the will so he would get all the money. But he got found out, and the money still went over to Rice. But Julian Huxley was, I think it was Julian, was the head of the biology department at Rice. And for a brief time, like for a summer maybe, he was roommates with Norbert Wiener of the Cybernetics in Houston. Yeah, I know, right? And they were studying the axolotl, and you know, it's interesting, the whole thing with the axolotl and these salamanders, because it's all about regeneration, right? And that's the stuff Michael Levin's been talking about, this morphogenesis and growing limbs back and all sorts of things. So anyway, Rice has this interesting history, and we were there particularly because of their role in nanotechnology and the discovery of the Buckminster fullerene, these carbon nanoballs for delivery of all sorts of stuff. And when we went, there was a brick hall that had like an exterior hallway, and on the little wall had a plaque for the Buckminster fullerene, and we took a picture of it, and we didn't notice until later that there was an embossed brick next to it that actually had a Saturn. So like Rice has this nano stuff and the space science stuff and a lot of stuff going on. All the better for your blockchain mind file for space colonization. The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation.
Whoa, look at that. I didn't notice that when I went through your slides, but the grabbing hands.
Oh,
I keep a collection of all the hands. That's so weird. Sorry.
You should get that one. Yeah, there's no heart in that one, but there's a lot of hands. There's a lot of like
grabbing hands, grab all they can.
Exactly. So this was the first World OER Congress was in 2012. And I guess it was in Slovenia. Again, very global, and it was organized by the Commonwealth of Learning and UNESCO, and the money came from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, and they're the major funder of OER. And then they had their first declaration, but so it's UNESCO, Slovenia, and the Open Education Resources. But again, so not that long, really, 2012. So we're just like 10 years in, but there's a ton of money. So if you go to the Hewlett Foundation grant list, you can look under and see which ones are OER. Now, what I'm hearing a lot of about and what their pitch is that this is about affordability and equity, right? And they frame it as college textbooks. Oh, look how expensive college textbooks are.
Oh, and how heavy they are. You don't want to have to carry them.
You don't want to have to
That's
carry
what the legislators were like, well, carry that backpack, and it's 8 pounds, and it's.
But meanwhile, they've got your fitness gram, right? Like, well, let's just add it to
my
the
laptop
gram.
about breaks my back because it's so heavy in my backpack. So it's no different.
Right. No, it's no different. So, but they want to frame it as an equity issue, right? Oh, poor kids can't buy these expensive textbooks, so you might as well have the OER. But the thing they don't tell you about is all of the metadata. And, you can look and see that there's stuff around, the, like even like with any of these online readers, like the Kindle, like they know how far you went. They know when you turned it on, how many pages you read, how quickly you read. They probably have tracking about your eye tracking or something on it. And so all of that data, you might be like, well, I don't care. I'm not doing anything wrong. But it's about prediction and knowing you as a person, right? Like, are you somebody who studies late at night, early in the morning? Do you do an assignment and then you cram it all at once, or do you space it out? Like all of this informs on you as a person over time and in very subtle ways that adds up. So I would say that this idea of just having OER as equity is a problem, because it's actually submitting people to a ton of data surveillance. The other thing is that the Hewlett Foundation was funding deeper learning. And I don't know if that's something you hear a lot about in Dallas, but deeper learning comes up a lot. And it's often framed as like project-based learning or critical thinking or group work, like kind of as an antithesis to like rote learning. Oh, we're doing deeper learning. And I think what's her face, Linda Darling Hammond, is all about the deeper learning.
Right.
But the thing about Hewlett-Packard is that they literally re-engineered the social sector for social impact finance too. So they're not just in education, they're also in the philanthropy sector to make it all data-driven, to set it up for the impact finance. And I have a whole blog post that I wrote about it back in 2018, actually. And I went through, and this is when I was still on Little Sis, and I pretty much mapped all their grants. And I could be like, okay, so within the remaking NGOs, here's where they bought all the crowdsourcing funding, right? Here's where they bought all the philanthropy publications, the journals. Here's where they bought all of the identity politics groups. And you could just map it, like, you know, every single one. And like I would sort of arrange them like in these different categories, and you could just see how they bought everyone. Like, and not for a lot of money, like $50,000 a pop, you know, like not huge amounts of money. There's boop, 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 boop. And they just identified all the sectors and they just bought them. And then told everyone it was a good idea. and then I wrote another piece the following year called Hewlett-Packard and the Pitfalls of Deeper Learning in an Internet of Things World. And what I'm saying is the Hegelian dialectic of like, oh yeah, don't you hate all of that sitting online and working on the stupid online programs? Oh, well, don't we hate screen time? Yes, we should all put people onto group projects. Only here's your smart shirt and your wearables and your slippers with sensors in them. And so the AI can literally watch every move you make, or maybe not even that invasive. Maybe they just have an artificial vision camera on the ceiling and they can literally watch you as you're doing things and make these predictions. And so the deeper learning, they were all about the big ocean traits, right? The big 5 traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. You know, and so they're developing all of these data points on kids in the name of deeper learning. So it's not just OER. You have to consider the whole package: the data-driven philanthropy and the deeper learning with the personality assessments. And so here's just some images of them. They gave a lot of money to Rice. Rice was one of their big projects was called OpenStax with an X, OpenStax, and they were doing the library for OER. So they were funding all of these materials. And I also included an image from one of their other programs called Real-Time Neural Engineering, which is kind of crazy because their
little owl.
Their image is an owl. And do you, like, Lynn, is it just me? It's not exactly, but it looks a little buckyballish. It looks a little bit like a nanostructure, these big eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that embedded owl in Harlan Crow's
I know.
The old Parkland has those embossed owl. The coin.
Athena. Yeah, all of the owl stuff. Yeah, so this is just some images of Rice and all the money they got. This is just a few, but for the OpenStax.
And also with Clarence Thomas and that thing I sent you, Harlan Crow, you know, it's all in the news that he takes, Harlan takes Clarence Thomas to Bohemian Grove and all that, and that has the owl as their symbol. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't realize Harlan Crow had an Adirondacks out, you know, thing, because again, upstate New York, you know, that's New York, Eric Schmidt, IBM. You know, they're very heavily, like, they're remaking Education, Schmidt Futures. So he didn't just hang out in Dallas, right?
Right.
But again, I don't think people imagine the programming that might come in the VR headset. And today I was just like listening to a talk about optogenetics and the use of light to program neurons through non-invasive means. Literally, like, I mean, they were talking about using this rhodopsifins or something like that, and it wasn't that they would have to put like nodes in your brain. They could do it remotely. And so I'm just thinking, wow, and they could control people's behavior. The guy who was doing it was a psychiatrist, and he was talking about dissociation. And I'm like, this stuff is almost all about like programming you to dissociate. And so I think it's really important that people understand that dealing with these digital materials, it's not just the data mining, but it's literally the brain entrainment and potentially even the heart entrainment, because they seem to be interested in the heartbeat. And the other thing, like the entrainment of the heart with these wearables, is very concerning. So this is just an image of OpenStax, and they're like, oh, look, and they have this super diverse group of kids holding up these textbooks: sociology, calculus, chemistry. Look at us. We have these wonderful, like, generic textbooks that are just making us so happy, and we're so diverse and, you know, enthusiastic. And so, yeah, so this OpenStax is...
Everyone should and can have access to knowledge, Allison.
Yes. And as long as it's trackable. Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, so it's its own 501c3, And it says, through our partnerships with philanthropic foundations and our alliance with other educational resource companies, we are breaking down barriers. And so I think this is the thing that people need
No, the
to...
barriers here, this is the thing, you always have to flip the language. The barriers are the barriers and the access to us.
Yeah,
They've
the
had a
protection.
barrier to get it to us, and the access is about accessing us,
Exactly.
not the other way around.
Exactly. Yep. But like now that you, I mean, and the thing that I think is really important for people to get their heads around is the next phase is data and predictive analytics and pay for success. That's where the money is. So they're fine to make this open and free and the Creative Commons and all that stuff, because it has to be open so that it can be maximally interoperable for this Ant computer program. So there, this idea that Pearson or McGraw-Hill or these textbook companies want to make a bunch of money and they're going to all be really angry at the OER people for giving free textbooks. No. We're just moving into a new phase, right? So this idea of like somehow it's not going to happen because how would Pearson make their money? It's all been part of the plan for like 30 years that this is coming next.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be too angsty about it. So look who is championing OpenStax. So among the champion agencies are the National Science Foundation, the Office of Naval Research, the Texas Education Agency, and the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board.
Right, and it's important to note that they combine the Senate education for K-12 and higher ed. And so the reskilling, upskilling chair is one person. So they don't have two separate chairs. That's unprecedented, done by our lieutenant governor. Yeah, and then you look at Arnold Ventures here. So John Arnold was a partner with Mike Morath, the head of the Texas Education Agency, back when Mike was on the DISD school board, to take over the mayoral control of the school board. And Arnold has been funding the portfolio model of education, which is privatization in different forms in Midland, which you and I have talked about. So yeah, you've got all these people. And then Open Society, is that
that's Soros.
Is that Soros?
Yeah. So
and we
that's
just
all the
accused
UN.
the guy, this billionaire. We just talked to him today, and he's been funding this open education resources bill behind the scenes, put together a team to get this passed. His right-hand man came from working for John Arnold. But we said, look, you think you're on the right and doing all this to get rid of DEI and CRT and blah, blah, blah. And you're like the other Soros. It's like the two sides
You
of
should
this.
show him this link. I mean, do you know
I will.
who's funding
I'm like, are you
OER?
that
It is
dense?
Open Society.
It's so frustrating because he refuses to see it, and he goes, "Oh, we got to get rid of that CRT in the schools," and then he's funding this. It's nonsense. It comes in through the technology anyway. You don't get rid of it.
Again, they've got the Gates Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation, Open Society.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of these, and then I think this is the last one tonight. But virtual reality, the implications for open education resources. And then this is what I thought was interesting. So like now, they've been pitching these field trips, educational field trips. So in this one, the field trip is actually to Avebury. So you've got like these sort of esoteric stone circles, is like the field trip. But I thought it was interesting because it was talking about the development of these different field trips, immersive partnerships. This is in England, and they're working with soundscapes. And so I feel like sound, again, the Office of Naval Research being a partner in this is really important because in addition to light conveying programming.
Yeah, well, you remember you
sound.
pointed out that billionaire, he was in the Navy, the one I just mentioned.
The Navy, it's all like
Soros.
Well, the other piece that I've been looking at, Stepha's like, she sent me a bunch of stuff today, and I just could only skim the surface because I was working on some other things, but it was about molecular communication and oscillation. So like how our bodies actually function is through oscillation. And that's the molecular vibrations. And we're so much water. And so literally they're using water and frequency to like, you can use frequency through the water in the body to change physiological aspects of how our biology works, like this biocomputational design. It's kind of wild. If you have 1 second, I might try to pull it up. But I'm looking at that and thinking about water, like us being water and conveyance. Like the Navy has been really key in developing the radar technologies of like ELF waves, extended long frequency waves or whatever, the ones that mess with the whales, to convey sound over long distances through water. So I feel like the biocomputation is kind of connected to this. I just want to show, so this is the blog post I put last night. I did a walk out to John Coltrane's house on Easter and made it set a dandelion intention. But I'm gonna sort of scroll through these. But at the end, we have mural arts in Philadelphia. I don't know if you guys have a mural arts program, but we've had one for a long time. And I feel like a lot of them are actually encoded. They're encoded messages in the art. And so this is one. John Coltrane was such an amazing jazz musician, and so there's a bridge that goes over some railroad tracks here that you can see, and they always have protective barriers so you don't jump onto the railroad tracks, and so it's this metal that's covered, and so it's sort of like a cut paper framing, and often like they're conveying, I think, the character of the neighborhood. And so there's this jazz music, and it wasn't just Coltrane. The whole area of North Philadelphia had a lot of rhythm and blues clubs and recording studios. And so you've got guitar players, although it's interesting, it almost looks like a bit like chains, right? Coming off the guitar.
I was just looking at that over there too. Mm-hmm.
And then these waves. The waves are at the bottom of the feet of the people who are, and that's I think that is a sound wave. And then look at the clouds and the lines coming out of the clouds. Like that looks a little bit like geoengineering. And then, so this is one side, and then the other side, it has a church that's up the way, but it has a different kind of a wave, more of a modular wave, black and white, that's extending across the bottom. And then this is back on the other side, there's like a knee wall that extends much beyond the mural, and it literally is the wave that's almost like the wave in the Learn Capital image that I showed before. So I feel like that the frequency, and then I went and I sat on this rock above the river, and you could see the vibrations in the water, like you kind of you could just see how it was vibrating. It wasn't even a super windy day, but I'm just thinking about the frequency and the fact that the Navy is involved in so many of these programs, and people who are involved in the Navy, and even the guy from Trammell Crow, who was the residential multifamily guy. He was he came out of the Naval Academy, and he was the largest individual donor to the Naval Academy Foundation. So, I don't know exactly where to pin the part of it, but our intuition is good. It's leading us to the right places. Eventually we'll get more of the story. So, well, thanks for joining me again, Lynn. This is awesome. I know you're going to Austin again and do another round. So
yeah, well, thanks for putting this together. I mean, it's really nice.
Does it make sense? Like, is it like the bigger, because it like amplify, yes, like at the first level, amplify, yes, probably social impact bonds, probably mass social impact bonds, but then the apprenticeships, the haptic data, and the people don't know where it comes from. Like, I mean, I would ask them, like, do you know where this actually comes from? Do you know?
Yeah,
like, where did it
and
come
that's
from?
the thing is they think that it's some sort of idea that came from an organic origin. It's not.
No,
it's not. It's never that interesting. It's always something that is way more sinister, sadly.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck.
Well, thank you. Yeah. To be continued, right?
To be continued. Yeah. At least one or two more parts, I think.